Yeah, all right. Tenakoto, 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 Katoa. Welcome everyone to the final SOLA seminar of the year. We will be resuming our seminars next year, hopefully in end of February, early March. The new schedule will be out in January. Today we have a PhD proposal seminar presented by our PhD student, Inderjit Kaur Bharaj, sorry, who will be talking about where she's at in her PhD. She just submitted her proposal, and Wendy McWilliam is the assessor today. So Inderjit, the way it's going to go, you have 30 minutes. Jill and I will leave our questions if we have any till the end, but we will open up for questions for the general public and mainly for Wendy at the end of your presentation. So please, everyone, mute your microphones when Inderjit is talking. And at the end, feel free to ask your questions by opening your microphone or by writing your question in the chat box. So I will be moderating the session, and I guess that's it. So it is recorded, and we will post the presentation. We will remove the Q&A because it's just more interesting to keep the presentation on our SOLA YouTube page. So Inderjit, the floor is yours. Good luck.
Thank you, Nada. Hello, everyone. My name is Inderjit Bharaj, and as Nada introduced, I'm a PhD student at SOLA. I'm currently studying offshore in India, and today I'll be presenting my thesis proposal. Before I start, I would like to thank my supervisors, Dr. Julia Lawson and Dr. Nada Tuer, for their support and guidance throughout the preparation of my proposal. I extend my thanks to Dr. Wendy McWilliam for accepting to be my assessor for this seminar. I would also like to introduce to you all and thank Dr. Renu Khosla, who is my associate co-supervisor and is the director of a Delhi-based NGO, Center for Urban and Regional Excellence. It was under Dr. Khosla's guidance that this project was conceived. Moving on to the presentation, the title of my research is Nurturing Water Citizenship to Create Self-Sufficient Communities. The structure of my presentation is divided into three parts. Part one is the introduction, which describes the research problem. Then I'll go through key points of literature review, which will lead to research questions. In part two, I briefly describe traditional water systems over different eras, particularly in North India. This is followed by research methods in part three. We start with the research problem. There has been an unprecedented demand for water in urban India in last few decades due to sharp rise in population, urbanization trends, and as well as anthropogenic climate change. However, the infrastructure systems of the government for supply of water and sanitation have not updated with time. The population in informal settlements have been worst affected by lack of water services. India constitutes 4% of world's water resources. However, 70% of its surface water resources are polluted with untreated sewage, discharge, and industrial effluents. Consequently, over the years, people started relying heavily on groundwater. The over-extraction of groundwater is not only leading to a considerable drop in water level, but also contaminating the groundwater. We can see in these pictures the various sources of groundwater contamination, like spraying of fertilizers and pesticides, which gets absorbed in the soil, leaking underground pipes, landfill sites, and industrial waste discharge in the rivers. These pictures here show the kind of water source points some people have at home in the informal settlements. This is the river Yamuna which flows through Delhi, and the white foam is all toxic, and people still take a dip on certain festivals. So in the absence of regular water supply at home, people use alternative sources, which are like common standposts in their settlements. This water is from municipal supply and is only available for a limited period of 2 to 4 hours every day. Second source is the hand pumps, which draw the groundwater. This is available 24 hours, but as we saw in the previous slide, it is contaminated. The third source is the water tankers. water tanker, which people can request from the water department. This again is the municipal water supply. So what we do know is that the surface water is polluted and the groundwater is contaminated, and people in informal settlements do not have access to safe and clean water. So several organizations have been working in these settlements to engage and sensitize and to facilitate provision of basic infrastructure. In this situation, rainwater provides a viable option for communities, and it can be seen as a positive step towards self-sufficiency. But only providing for them is not sufficient. In order to achieve that, their transition towards being water sensitive is important. To gain an understanding of the research in this field, I did a literature review of concepts relevant to my study. The main focus of my study is water citizenship. However, to understand this concept, it is important to first understand environmental citizenship and global citizenship, because this is how they appear in literature. Global citizenship, as defined by United Nations, is the umbrella term for social, political, environmental, and economic actions of individuals and communities on a worldwide scale. This concept is included as one of the targets of Sustainable Development Goals number 4, which provides all learners knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development and global citizenship. Environmental actions being a part of it, environmental citizenship emerged from it. I will briefly discuss environmental citizenship, which is about responsible pro-environmental behavior of citizens. Numerous researchers have explored various aspects and dimensions of citizenship. Description given by Pallet relates to this study. According to her, environmental citizenship emerged from two different concepts, environment and citizenship, where citizenship refers to sense of belonging to a particular community or neighborhood, city, or nation. It involves a certain set of rights and obligations while being a part of this community. And as primary focus of environmental citizenship is on regulating and reducing environmental impacts of individual actions, obligations comes to the foreground over rights. When I was still doing the literature review, I thought of focusing my study on rights rather than obligations, because if people do not have access to rights, they cannot be expected to feel obligated to protect rights of others. However, as I progressed and it started discussing water sensitive citizens, it seemed that obligations will be a part of what you provide to people in order to make them self-sufficient. Coming on to water citizenship, it is a fairly new concept which does not appear to have a specific definition. Various authors have explained this concept in their own ways by describing it as a process through which water users create membership, belonging, and managing and governing the water, whereas Silva and Kona perceived it as right to water as a natural right of mankind. The definition by Castro relates well to this study. He linked conventional citizenship rights like civil, political, and social to water. According to him, civil rights for property and justice also include inherent rights to water, particularly in relation to its access. Political rights call for people's participation in the governance process that would lead to governance models in relation to water. And social rights emphasize on universal access to minimum amount of water that is crucial for survival. Okay. The next concept is environmental governance, which is about actions and decisions we make while using Earth's natural resources. For achieving good environmental governance, contribution of communities are as important as contribution of government and non-government agencies. In India, environmental governance has led to formulation of acts and policies, but all with top-down approach. Public participation and delegation of powers are lacking in the governance framework. There is a large gap in the governance of key natural resources. I put a picture of Gandhiji here as there is a very appropriate quote of his that I have used. It says, "The earth provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not for anyone's greed," which is quite appropriate in today's times. Okay, coming back to this slide shows how the research gaps were identified from literature review. And this is the table that I had just shown about civil rights, political rights, and social rights. Civil rights talk about right to access to water. In India, states are unable to provide access, which is the basic infrastructure provision for improving quality of life of people. Water is linked to every aspect of life of people in India due to its culturally diverse population. Studies are needed on water use practices to understand diverse needs. Political rights are about people's participation in governance. Citizen participation concept only exists on paper. Dean et al. Conducted a study on water-sensitive citizens by analyzing them on cognition, emotion, and behavior on water-related issues. She defined them as water-sensitive citizens based on these categories. So categorizing communities based on water practices is we know little about. Social rights does not seem to have much relevance for India as there's not even basic access because it talks about universalizing the minimum volume of water. And environmental governance is about equal contribution from community. And government policies exist, but their implementation is partial. Interventions happen without understanding the needs of the people. So third gap is to identify barriers and enablers at governance level related to water policies. So the research aim is to investigate the self-sufficiency of households in informal settlements where water infrastructure is not provided or is inaccessible. Research objective being to identify a series of household daily water practices in low-income communities that fulfill the needs of diverse households. Second one, to categorize various communities of water practices and their attitude towards water conservation. And third, to determine barriers and enablers associated with water policies that can lead to self-sufficiency of these households. My research questions are, number one, how do households of the selected informal settlements carry out daily activities with respect to water? Second, what are the different communities of water practices based on their water usage and attitude towards water conservation? Third, what are the barriers and enablers associated with relevant water policies to households in informal settlements becoming self-sufficient in terms of access to water? Now we come to the second part of the presentation. While I studied the literature behind the modern concepts, it was important to go back in history to understand the relationship people had with water in the ancient times. This is the chronology of different eras for which I did a brief study related to water. Starting with the pre-Mughal era, this is the part of India showing river systems in North India. This one here. River systems have always played a significant role in growth and development of civilizations that developed around them throughout centuries. India's vast river systems always led to its invasions by various rulers. However, these rulers always protected public waters and provided for the people. There are various systems of water conservation that were built, like water tanks, step wells, and rainwater harvesting systems. Water bodies were used as boundaries between villages so that as many villages as possible had access to it. Mughal era lasted over 2 centuries in India. The water systems established by earlier rulers continued during the Mughal era. They worked extensively on developing water infrastructure further and redefined urban landscape. This is clearly visible in the monuments they built where gardens had water as an essential element. Water systems were built by emperors and maintained by people. There was a good partnership between the state and the people who equally respected water. These are some of the water systems that were used in Mughal times, mostly. The first These two are the Persian wheel system, where the series of these containers attached on wheel would lift water and empty it into a trough where people could collect the water. Then there were wells where people collected water and socialized, and the step wells, they in Hindi they are called baulis. They were, some of them were really big and they could be used as reservoir as well. British rule started in early 1800s, and it changed the urban landscape drastically. Piped water supply was introduced. Railway infrastructure was built to facilitate travel for crossing rivers. Factories were set up. All these new systems took society towards modernization, but it disconnected people from water because they were no longer involved in the local management of water systems. The post-independence era, in 1947, independence in 1947, majority of the cities followed a British pattern of infrastructure provisions, which was piped water supply and setting up of municipal bodies to govern the infrastructure. Industrialization led to migration towards urban areas, but government was unable to keep pace with housing and infrastructure provisions. This gradually resulted in mushrooming of slums in majority of urban areas in India. As far as water systems in the current times are concerned, water is a state subject as per Constitution of India, and the infrastructure responsibilities have been entrusted to local government bodies like municipal corporations. Majority of the households in informal settlements do not have water connections within the house. There is a large gap between the level of infrastructure required and actual services being provided. I had prepared my initial proposal before COVID, but in the current scenario, it is extremely significant to include it in my research, as water is one of the best ways to prevent spread of virus. The informal settlements lack access to it. Lack access to even basic requirement of water. So vulnerabilities created by lack of water are significant for them. This will be a part of my case study, even if it is not the focal point of discussion. And this is the third part of the presentation. I will be using a qualitative research method for this project, as it allows us to better understand the experiences, perspectives, beliefs, and attitudes of participants, and it will help in gaining in-depth insight into a problem. I will be using a case study methodology using ethnographic approach. Case study allows exploration of issues within a specific context, and a researcher can closely examine the data within that context. This method is applicable when the geographical area is small with limited number of participants. Two of the core methods within case study are interviews and observations. Interviews are usually face-to-face using unstructured or semi-structured questionnaires. They're usually recorded with permission and transcribed. Participant observations are a powerful tool for collection of data. A researcher gets a first-hand picture of what is actually happening on site, and these observations can be recorded as field notes and photographs. Analysis will be done after collection by preparing and organizing data and uploading on an NVO software where it can be coded into different themes. Coming on to site selection for case study. There are river systems in North India, as we saw earlier also. The Ganges is the largest river system in India. An Indo-Gangetic plain, which runs along the northern region, is one of the largest alluvial tracts in the world. This plain covers the majority of the state of Uttar Pradesh, the one which is highlighted. Uttar Pradesh has the highest percentage of groundwater reserve in the country, and still is the bottom performing state in groundwater restoration work. For these reasons, the concentration was on Uttar Pradesh. Within Uttar Pradesh is the historical famous city of Agra, which is located at the bend of river Yamuna, which is the largest tributary of the Ganges. Due to its location, Agra was traditionally a water-rich city, which over the decades has become one of the most water-stressed. Agra is divided into 4 wards, as you can see in different colors: yellow, green, pink, and this blue one. And for this study, I'll be concentrating on this ward called Tajganj, which I will explain in a few minutes. Before moving on to Tajganj, I'll quickly go over history of Agra. As we've already been through the history, I will keep it to the point. Agra emerged in late 1400s on western bank of river Yamuna. These are the old-time maps which I have got from a book which Nada very kindly shared with me, which shows the location of the main fort and Taj Mahal along river Yamuna. And then Agra grew to be water resilient during the Mughal rule. Post-colonization, it transformed into an industrial city. Agra is the city of famous Taj Mahal, which was built along the banks of river Yamuna. This is the picture taken in 1850s, where you can see a fairly clean river. In the present day, Yamuna is one of the most polluted. Floating tourist population adds to burden on city's water infrastructure. Few areas of city are still not networked into city's water distribution network. Informal settlements are on legally owned land, but still designated as slums due to lacking infrastructure. These factors make Agra an ideal case study. This is the approximate extent of Tajganj, there aren't any ready maps available online, so we marked it approximately. Oops. There isn't any, since there is no Tajganj map available online, I have not been able to visit and also have not been able to visit Agra even once due to COVID. So this map here I've got from a report prepared by Dr. Khosla's organization, Kaur. Tajganj is the real case study area because it is one of the oldest suburbs of Agra, but it provides a contrasting context to Taj Mahal. It is about 450-year-old settlement which housed the craftsmen that built the Taj. Now it is designated slum due to its unhygienic environmental conditions and lack of infrastructure facilities. People rely extensively on groundwater. Prior to COVID, Kaur had installed rainwater harvesting systems in few settlements in Tajganj, and they have been working in Agra since 2005 on slum improvement programs. Tajganj has about 23 settlements, out of which 2 will be selected. One settlement will be the one where Kaur has implemented rainwater harvesting systems, and the other one will be in a contrasting location nearby. Data methods. Data methods will include document analysis, which are published and unpublished documents available online for now. Site observations will be visual inspection of the site to get an overview of water source points. These will be recorded as field notes and photographs. Naturally occurring talks, casual talks with residents either when they are collecting water or just curious individuals. Participant recruitment strategy. The Kaur team will help introduce some context from the settlement. They will accompany me to their site for initial couple of visits to introduce the site, identify water collection points, and the participants will then be recruited using door knock approach. Prior to door knocking exercise, I will carry out site observations to connect to people. Participants will also be recruited using snowball sampling. This study will use maximum variation sampling strategy through which households with diverse family sizes will be recruited to participate. Interviews will involve 3 cohorts. First cohort will be households from selected settlements, and 30 participants will be selected for unstructured interviews. Second cohort will be government officials, where 2 officials will be interviewed. Third cohort is the Kaur team members who have been working in Agra in these settlements. This table shows methods to be followed to answer each research question. First question will use site observations, naturally occurring talks, unstructured interviews using ethnographic perspective. These will help identify typology of daily water use practices and gain understanding on people's knowledge and capacity to apply that knowledge. Steps for second question involve return visit to households interviewed to confirm information provided in first interview. Sometimes there is a gap between the beliefs people express towards water conservation and their behavior in translating those beliefs into practice, which is the value action gap. This will help identify diverse water use communities. For question 3, I will be interviewing the government officials to understand government policies and programs in place to address water issues in informal settlements. Interviews with Kaur will help gain information from NGO's perspective and also to help triangulate information provided by government and fill the gaps. The analysis will help identify barriers and enablers in implementation of policies at local level. Limitations, there have been limitations as I've not been able to visit the site yet. In case COVID restrictions are in place again at the time of field work and interviews, the work will be conducted online. Government data on population has not been updated since March 2020. These facts and figures will be updated as and when they are available during the course of the study. I will be applying for a human ethics approval from Lincoln University Human Ethics Committee before starting any human interaction on site. Contributions. This research will provide data on daily water use practices, data on different communities of water practices, which can be useful in informing water policies of future, and barriers and enablers associated with water policies, which can be helpful in modification of policies and programs designed to benefit communities. This is my schedule where I am currently at presenting my seminar and in the process of applying for my human ethics approval. That's it. Thank you very much for patiently listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.